privilege is mine this morning to call to order this opening ceremony of the 44th annual meeting of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank. As I will have an opportunity to speak at greater length shortly during the proceedings of this opening ceremony, I will not avail myself of the current opportunity to offer any remarks and will instead proceed immediately with the program before us. The first item on our agenda is an address by His Excellency the President of Guyana. And I now have the privilege of inviting to the podium His Excellency President Donald Ramotar. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, please be seated. Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Samuel Hines, Prime Minister Denzel Douglas, Premier Reuben Meade, President of the CDB, President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Ministers of Government and visiting ministers, delegates and officials of the CDB, visiting delegations, special invitees, friends all. Indeed, it gives me great pleasure to be here this morning to welcome those of you who are visiting Guyana, particularly those who are here for the first time. And also I understand that this is attending the first meeting from the representative of Suriname, our neighbor. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome our neighbor at this meeting. I hope that you will have the opportunity of seeing something of Guyana, because as you know, Guyana has strong features. Our coastal area is totally Caribbean, but in our interior, we're South America. So you have an opportunity in seeing two in one here. This is the CDB is one of the important institutions of the Caribbean. And the Caribbean unity, for Caribbean unity and integration, we need strong institutions to develop and consolidate our unity. And the Caribbean Development Bank is one of the institutions that we need to build and allow it to grow from strength to strength. And I'm sure that it has played an important part already, and in the future, it will play a very important part in promoting integration of our region. Our region is facing many challenges. Some of them are due to some of our successes as well. A lot of the countries, most of the countries in the region have graduated from being poor, hippie countries, and some are now being described as middle-income countries. And as a result of that, a lot of concessional financing to the region is being dried up at this point in time. But I think that that is probably short-sighted in a way, because the region needs to consolidate its gains. It needs to build on its successes. It needs to immunize itself from some of the difficulties that exist. And it needs, of course, still needs. It will be a tragedy if we retrogress, and we still need, in many, many ways, some type of concessional arrangements to ensure that our progress would be steady. And this is a major problem, and is threatening socio-economic gains and the needs that I've spoken about. We cannot afford a reversal. Much of the problems, too, that the region face originate from outside of us and have impacted heavily on us. The financial and economic crises that gripped the world between 2007 and 2008, which we had nothing to do with, have impacted heavily on many of the countries of the region. And that is why, again, I think we need a lot of support at this point in time for us to continue to grow. We, however, must work closely, not only to overcome these problems, but also to, as far as possible, immunize ourselves from the contagion that so often impact on us. Broadening our economy, our economic base, the economic base of the region, is therefore very important. We have to look at new areas of growth, pursuing them and identifying the instruments that we must use to deal with the issues and to look at new things that we have to do. What has been clear over the years is that information and communication technology has been impacting in every aspect of life, and we have to use it more widely and use it to help our integration processes, help us to develop and strengthen our base. Developing the human capital, too, is very important for us in order for us to continue to move forward. That is why I'm very happy with the role that the bank has been playing in the region in helping us to develop many of the institutions. And only yesterday, there was an opening of a school on the east bank of the Essequibo. And that is important because we know it has been proven over and over again that the countries with the fastest and highest standard of living are not necessarily the countries with the most natural resources, but are the countries where we have a strong human capital. And therefore, the role of the bank in helping in this area, helping our region to build its human capital in education, in health, in housing, in other areas, this role is vital for the development of our region. We also face the issue of climate change, another problem that is being recognized as a global problem, and another problem where we have had very little to do with creating it. But of course, we can't escape it, and we have to be part of the solution to continue to fight for a solution to this serious global issues. And that is important to try to turn this into an opportunity, and how we can use the development of a green economy in order to push forward on our economic development. We in Guyana have worked out quite an elaborate strategy, our low-carbon development strategy in that regard. We will be pursuing renewable energy and trying to maximize the use. We have to also try to maximize the use of our products by adding a lot of value to our products. We have been producing raw materials for centuries and with very few finished products that we need to do that as early as possible. We need also greater investment in our agriculture and to apply more science and technology into this area. No longer should the image of agriculture be seen as only a ragged man barefooted in the fields, but we must change the image of that by using more technology, more science in the development of agriculture. In the region we should look at our potentials. I know that this has been said very often at both heads of government meetings and at other forums of the region, that our importation bill for food is far too high. And the need for us to have food security is extremely important. And to do that, we have to build on our agricultural capacity, our agricultural potential. We have to also broaden what we produce. We have been traditionally producing sugar and in our country rice, but we have possibilities of producing other things to broaden the base of agriculture and to be able to give our region full food security. At the same time, we must always be cognizant of the great inequalities that exist in our world and try to see what we can do, what measures, what policies can we pursue to close the income gap within countries, within our region, and even internationally. Some of the figures are really too startling and tell us that if we don't do something about this, we're quoting instability and disasters. So broadening our relations too in the world is something that we have to constantly do, to give ourselves more opportunity and to give us, our countries and our region, greater possibility. So in the future, I think that the bank and the leadership of the bank should help us to try to identify new sources of growth as we see that our comparative advantage in some of the things that we did in the past are not as strong as they used to be. While I still think we should work to develop those, but one of the big challenges that you can help and make a major contribution to the region with is to identify new sources, new areas of how we can grow. And the bank also should concern itself with how do we deal with the big debts that many of the countries in our region face, debts that are becoming a millstone around the neck of the region and helping to retard the development of our region. And how do we internalize climate change as a developmental issue in our planning processes? These are areas I think that the bank can help us a lot. These are the challenges, the immediate challenges that we face. These are the issues that are immediately confronting us. But I think together, once we work together, once we put our minds together, I'm sure that the region is not short of talent. Now, the bank is not short of talent, and we can find a way forward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency President Ramatar. In keeping with the customary format of these opening ceremonies, we will now receive the benefit of 3 replies to His Excellency's welcome address. It gives me great pleasure, therefore, to introduce the first speaker to deliver the first of these 3 replies. The first of these replies will be given by the Governor for the British Overseas Territories, the Honourable Premier Reuben Mead of Montserrat. Premier Mead. Premier Mead is replying on behalf of the borrowing member countries of the bank.
Thank you very much. My brother, the distinguished President of Guyana, my brothers and sisters all. I bring greetings from the governments and people of Montserrat and the other United Kingdom overseas territories. We also join in welcoming Suriname to this, their inaugural meeting. On behalf of all of the delegations, we wish to thank the government of Guyana and the staff of the Caribbean Development Bank for the arrangements made for comfort, enjoyment, and security. These factors do impact on the quality of work which we accomplish here. As we conduct this particular meeting, there are many policy challenges facing the region, and in particular, small, open, and vulnerable economies such as ours. While we have had some economic successes in the past, the protracted financial global economic morass and the ensuing international regulatory regime have exposed and aggravated the vulnerabilities that exist. Consequently, our region continues to experience weak growth, elevated fiscal imbalances, and heightened risk within the financial markets. These factors affect the quality of life of our residents and citizens. An appropriate solution to the challenges we face will be extremely difficult without the help of our development partners, to include the IFI community. This is principally due to our limited resource base, available financial policy instruments, productive capacity constraints, and general inefficiencies related to economies of scale. These will continue to create barriers to growth, with consequential impacts on budgets and the private sector whom we depend on to fuel growth. We are appreciative of the support of the bank in making funding available through loans at concessional rates and also grants, especially through the BNTF program. This has benefited some of the overseas territories, but several are still unable to benefit from grants because of their perceived wealth as indicated by their per capita GDP. Nevertheless, the introduction of policy-based lending has helped to target resources to areas of priority. We are, however, concerned about the delays in the approval of these much needed resources and encourage the bank and ourselves to seek where improvements can be made and to do so. In this regard, I wish to thank the non-borrowing members for their continued support to this and other programs of the bank. The banking system remains under considerable stress in most of our territories. The non-performing loan portfolio in some of our jurisdictions, poor management and cost of operations, along with a reduction in investment opportunities, have significantly reduced the viability of some indigenous banks. This can be seen from forced interventions in a few banks and significant losses in others. Whether a resolution strategy is implemented now or later, the issue will need to be comprehensively addressed. There is no doubt that our membership, to varying degrees, look forward to work collaboratively with CDB and the other IFIs on the work being done in this area. The people of the region depend on us to find acceptable solutions. While we seek to move forward in a very positive way, it is also important for us to look within the bank and to seek to resolve whatever internal HR issues that may be lurking in the shadows. These underlying issues can and will continue to impact on the work of this very important institution. We must remember the HR mandate given in the establishment of the bank in terms of its top management positions. In closing, I wish to encourage the bank to continue to focus on its mandate of working with us as borrowing members on achieving our various developmental objectives. The distinguished President of Guyana has enunciated many of these areas of focus, and I wish to support his requests for a workable approach to be found. We continue to rely on the support of the highly trained staff of the bank to provide the requisite advice to the smaller borrowing members individually and as a group. If ever we needed to work more cohesively as a group, it is now. My brothers and sisters, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Premier Meade. The second reply to His Excellency's welcome address will be delivered on behalf of the regional non-borrowing members of the bank, for which purpose I invite to the podium the Governor for Colombia, Mr. Alberto de Brigard.
Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, distinguished governors, directors, President of CDB, management and staff of the bank, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and a pleasure for me to respond to the warm welcome of His Excellency President Donald Ramotar on behalf of Colombia, Mexico, and Venezuela, regional non-borrowing members of the bank. For us, nationals of non-insular Caribbean countries, such as the beautiful Guyana, it is most interesting to have yet another occasion of encountering those similarities and contrasts among our countries that make integration processes certainly complex, but above all, so full of possibilities. Allow me to take this opportunity to express our appreciation for the efforts made by government and private agents in organizing this meeting and for making our stay in Guyana so pleasurable. Mr. President, among the many points to be discussed by the Board of Governors of CDB in the next couple of days, we consider that the grounds for the strategic plan for the 5-year cycle that will start in 2015 are particularly important. We think that the recently adopted format for our meetings creates the most appropriate and valuable forum for a frank and open debate about the route that the bank should follow in coming years. In particular, this is the right moment for aligning, in a realistic and flexible structure, the development objectives of both donor and borrowing member countries with the absorbed capacity, the project pipelines, and country strategies of the borrowing members. In this strategic planning process, it is crucial to give much attention to our approach to some transversal objectives, such as gender equality, climate change response, disaster prevention, citizen security, among others. By their very nature, those are issues that in general transcend national borders and individual countries' resources. We know that CDB is recognized as a trusted partner at the time of designing and implementing national programs that touch these problems, and we hope that our discussions here contribute to generate more initiatives that are regional in scope, as well as to mainstream these issues for the benefit of the people of the region as solid foundation for sustainable social and economic progress. The regional borrowing member countries are willing to take their part in this analysis, and in regional programs aim to make life easier, safer, and with more opportunities for every woman and every man in this part of the world. That is just one of the many reasons, Mr. Chairman, that make me glad to reiterate our support to the purposes and activities of the bank. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Governor for Colombia. The third and final reply to His Excellency's welcome address will be delivered on behalf of the non-regional members of the bank, for which purpose I now invite the Governor for Italy, Mr. Pablo Facchini.
Honorable President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Chairman of the Board of Governors, President of the Bank, distinguished governors, ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor for me and a pleasure to respond on behalf of the non-regional countries of the Caribbean Development Bank to the warm welcome of the President of Guyana. I would like to express our sincere thanks to the people of Guyana and their government for the very gracious hospitality that has been extended to us since our arrival in this beautiful country. Our sincere thanks go also to the manager and the staff of the CDB for the professional preparation and organization of this 44th annual meeting. We are meeting here today to review the activities of the CDB in year 2013, during which some remarkable results were achieved. The time elapsed since we met in St. Lucia last year has been a challenging period for many countries of the region. Last year, the bank approved a volume of operation of $167 million. Although modest, this increase over the previous year's figure can be considered a satisfactory result considering the current circumstances of limited fiscal space of many borrowing member countries. More importantly, however, there was a stepping up of disbursement totaling almost $192 million, representing a 65% increase over the corresponding figure of the previous year. If the bank has always been ready to work together with its borrowing member countries under different circumstances, this is thanks to its deep knowledge of the region, combined with its willingness to reach shared objectives in the spirit of multilateralism. As non-regional members of this bank, we recognize the geographic, social, and economic challenges of the small island developing states that account for many of the borrowing member countries. Our membership of the CDB is one more sign that the international community is ready to help fight poverty and promote sustainable growth. In this regard, we welcome the agreements for the bank to manage the implementation of the European Union-funded economic partnership agreements and the Caribbean Community Single Market and Economy standby facilities. We particularly welcome the increased engagement of the bank in the area of climate change, which constitute a major threat to the region. In this regard, we highly appreciate the participation of the Executive Director of the Green Climate Fund at this annual meeting. In the current context, the bank has a crucial role to play, one for which a solid institution is needed. In this regard, we welcome the strengthening of the bank's risk capacity and the removal of the negative outlook of its credit rating by its credit rating agencies. We look forward to the Governor's discussion on the strategic plan 2015-2019. In order to be well equipped to face the challenges ahead, the bank should continue to be innovative and ambitious in increasing its support to the region. In this regard, it is our pleasure to welcome the delegation of Suriname at their first annual meeting. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, let me extend on behalf of the non-regional members our sincere appreciation for all your good work over the past 12 months and to President Smith for his leadership. We also want to acknowledge the work and dedication of all the staff of the bank for their contribution towards achieving our shared developmental objectives. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Governor Fahini. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item on the agenda is the opening address by the Chairman of the Board of Governors, for which purpose yours truly is already at the podium. Your Excellency President Donald Ramotar, Prime Minister Samuel Hines, Prime Minister Denzel Douglas, Premier Reuben Meade, fellow ministers and other governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Sir Dennis Byron, President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. William Warren Smith, management and staff of the bank, delegates and observers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to join President Ramotar in extending a warm welcome to all of you who have traveled from across the Caribbean and beyond to be with us in Guyana for this 44th annual meeting of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank. Permit me to extend in particular a special welcome to Guyana's eastern neighbor Suriname, who's attending these meetings for the first time as full members of the bank. Guyana considers itself greatly honored to be hosting all of you this week, and we trust that your deliberations will be fruitful, your stay enjoyable, and your memories happy and lasting. We meet at a time that will, in every likelihood, come to be regarded by posterity as one of the defining junctures in our Caribbean region's evolving history. Most of our countries that have not yet overtaken the half-century marker since political independence already have that milestone clearly in sight. This bank, whose history parallels so closely that of the region it was established to serve, is similarly poised, just a handful of years away from its own semi-centennial anniversary. Without a doubt, we, the small states of the Caribbean, can derive considerable pride from the fact that we've acquired since independence, even if with considerable effort to overcome great difficulty at times, most of the symbolic accoutrements and institutional trappings of statehood. Today, our countries are represented in the councils of the United Nations. We occupy pride of place amongst the global family of democracies. Our flags flutter over the medal podiums of the Olympic Games, albeit not as frequently as we might wish. And some aspects of our cultures, like the music we make and the food we eat, have finally started to enjoy a measure of nationality-based brand recognition. We've also formulated an ambitious aspiration of regional integration, clearly recognizing the necessity of togetherness when confronted by the limitations of smallness. Next year will mark the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Caribbean Free Trade Area, and last year marked the 40th anniversary of its successor, the Caribbean Community. So much has been accomplished. Of that, there's little doubt. Having said that, the stark reality is that at the dusk of half a century of nationhood, the small states of the Caribbean appear no less vulnerable, either individually or taken as a collective, than we were at the start of the journey. Indeed, when compared to the global context of 50 years ago, today's world comprises infinitely more insidious channels through which vulnerability is exacerbated instead of mitigated. What we have not managed to accomplish after 50 years is to lift ourselves beyond the pale of existentially threatening exposure, whether it be to the specter of climate change or to the vicissitudinous global economy. Our exposure to the forces of nature have been amply illustrated over the years with increasingly volatile, unpredictable, and intense weather, along with rising sea levels combining to threaten our very existence in some cases and our entire infrastructural and productive bases in others. Some of the Caribbean islands and low-lying coastal plains will literally disappear under the sea with the most minimal of sea level rises, while others amongst us can have our entire economy decimated by a single severe hurricane. At the same time, our exposure to the increasingly unpredictable external environment is stark, with the global and hemispheric economy more integrated and interconnected than at any previous time in history. The risks arising from low and unpredictable external demand for service products such as our tourism and volatile imported and exported commodity prices, along with contracting foreign direct investment, official development assistance, and diasporic remittances, conspire to create conditions of extreme unhelpfulness. Meanwhile, our region's economic performance has been mixed at best. The dichotomy between the commodity producers and the service providers amongst us has become more evident and has brought into sharper focus the problematic under-diversification and monosectoral dominance persistent in almost all of our economies. The result has been retarded growth, fiscal stress, and unsustainable debt. That is where we are today, 50 years on, at a place where, in some instances, the very viability of the vulnerable small state of the Caribbean appears under threat. Starting from the premise that this viability is for us non-negotiable, an eminently reasonable premise given the fervor we attach to our independence, the question that inevitably arises is one of defining the interventions that are needed now to attain and secure this viability. In essence, what must we do now to ensure that the vulnerable small state of the Caribbean becomes, or as the case might be, remains a viable entity? And beyond viability, to ensure that it achieves the real and lasting prosperity that its people have anxiously awaited for such a long time. This is the question that must preoccupy the minds and efforts of the intellectual and political leadership of the region, and to which an answer is urgently needed. Without wishing to create any appearance of preempting the outcome of that effort, and even as we address our minds to finding the answer to that admittedly sweeping and long vexing question, there are certain evident realities that demand immediate attention. Firstly, the onset and onslaught of time seem to have brought with them a fading of our conviction on the validity of the single Caribbean identity and the value of Caribbean oneness. Regionalist fervor is being supplanted by parochialist caution, openness by inwardness, competition by protectionism, ideological passion by myopic opportunism. We in the region seem to be happier contesting against and amongst each other than contesting together against the rest of the world. Whether the latter is a sign of our times or the zone of greater comfort for us, the inevitable consequence is suboptimal productivity and competitiveness, and the unavoidable victim is the Caribbean citizen, no matter how unbeknownst to him for the time being. We need to work more urgently and concertedly to restore faith in regionalism, pride in regional identity, and enthusiasm for the regional enterprise. Secondly, I remain convinced that there is no more effective way to achieve the former than by demonstrated and demonstrable practical successes in the integration effort, not within the corridors of the regional bureaucracy, but in the streets and markets where people's lives are more immediately touched. The Barbadian company that raises financing in Trinidad, invests in large-scale agriculture in Guyana, employs Guyanese workers and grows produce for export back to Barbados and to the Eastern Caribbean is regional integration illustrated. The Guyanese manufacturer that establishes a distributorship in Trinidad and Suriname, creates jobs and finds ready markets for his competitively priced goods in those countries is regional integration illustrated. We need more examples like these of the factors of production from across the region harnessed for the regional good. There must be renewed haste to remove all impediments to factor mobility across and within a truly single regional space. Thirdly, certain priority projects for a more effective and competitive single regional space have been languishing for far too long and must have restored to them the highest degree of urgency. Amongst these are the reduction of vulnerability to climate change, of which much has already been said, the achievement of greater food security in the region, the achievement of greater energy security, especially by harnessing clean and renewable sources, resolving critical gaps in transport and communications infrastructure, and addressing legislative, regulatory, and institutional impediments to intra-regional trade. Single-minded focus must be placed on these long-established priority projects if a more competitive regional economy is to be achieved in this generation. Throughout all this, what should we as a region expect and demand of our regional development bank? Before I endeavor to offer thoughts on this question, permit me to emphasize that the Caribbean Development Bank has provided outstanding service to this region since the earliest days of its inception. The bank has grown in size and in volume of activity and has contributed to the achievement of tangible and visible development outcomes in all our BMCs. That having been said, the bank has, since its establishment, been the repository and custodian of some of the region's finest human intellectual assets, a trend that I am convinced continues today. The bank's lineage of leadership reads like the roll call of Caribbean titans, and its management and staff list comprise today some of the region's most able contemporary development theorists and practitioners. We expect the bank to provide intellectual leadership in helping the region define the challenges we face and design the solutions with which to overcome these. Whether it is to articulate more rigorously to the international community the case of Caribbean vulnerability, or indeed to design more innovative instruments to address the indebtedness of so many of our countries, the bank can reasonably be expected to be more proactive in providing intellectual leadership in solving the pressing development puzzles of our region. Secondly, the bank was established as the principal intermediary of development resources in the region. As I said recently when I met with the staff of the bank, this is a position that the bank must guard jealously. We do not have the luxury in this region of a surfeit of resources to permit replication of regional institutions or duplication of regional institutional capacity. The bank needs to position itself as the most competitive and most efficient intermediary of development support, demonstrating greater value to its shareholders, including its non-regional shareholders. The bank must also demonstrate even greater success than it has thus far in mobilizing larger volumes of development resources into the region. This can be accomplished by attracting a larger share of the regional programs that now appear to be the preference of some bilateral partners. This can also be accomplished by demonstrating the value of a stake in Caribbean development to a broader audience of potential non-regional borrowers, and therefore expanding the bank's membership to attract greater participation by non-regional members and higher volumes of special funds contributed by these members. Thirdly, recognizing the severity of the fiscal constraint facing us in the region and acknowledging that it would be impossible for the required investments for transformation to be made within the confines of public sector fiscal and debt sustainability, it is absolutely critical that the bank pays greater attention to private sector financing. This is to be done potentially through at least two principal avenues. Firstly, through the more conventional vehicle of private sector operations, And secondly, by leveraging the private sector's own resources, using instruments such as public-private partnerships. I remain convinced that it is only by mobilizing private capital that the investment gap in the region will be resolved, including to address some of the areas I described earlier as the region's priority projects. Mr. President, I make these observations not at all to convey any dissatisfaction with the performance of the bank thus far. On the contrary, in Guyana's estimation, and I have no doubt that I speak for all of my colleague governors representing BMCs, the bank has been an exemplary development partner throughout its history. In much the same manner, I raise these issues not because I believe that they have any degree of novelty in them. On the contrary, I am well aware that successive generations of leaders of our region and of our bank have been wrestling with these same questions. As I have said in a slightly different context on another occasion, the question for us is really whether we wish to be just the latest generation engaging in lamentation of current challenges, or whether we would like to be known instead for being the generation that found valid and lasting answers when asked the inextricably intertwined questions: whither the vulnerable small state of the Caribbean, wherefore the Caribbean Development Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, before I bring to a close this opening ceremony, there are two administrative matters that must be addressed and disposed of. The first is the report of the Procedures Committee, and that report will be delivered by the Governor for Trinidad and Tobago, Senator Dr. the Honorable Boendradat Tiwari. Senator Tiwari.
Chairman, distinguished Excellency, the President of Guyana, all honorable Prime Ministers, honorable ministers here present, Secretary General of CARICOM, and other high officials here present. Mr. Chairman, Governors, the Procedures Committee met on Tuesday, May 27th, 2014 at 9:10 a.m. And the report of this committee dated May 28th, 2014 is before you. I have the honor, Mr. Chairman, to table the report on behalf of the committee and to move that the Board of Governors adopt the recommendations contained therein. That's it.
Thank you very much, Governor for Trinidad and Tobago. I take it, in the absence of any indication of dissent, that the recommendations contained in the report tabled are adopted. The last administrative matter before us is my own report on the selection of directors for the next term of office. Governors would be aware that on the convening of the current meeting, the current term of directorial office would have expired, and new directors are required to be appointed. I now wish to report on the appointment of new directors for the ensuing term of office. Selection of directors, Chairman's report. In accordance with paragraph 4 of Article 29 of the Agreement establishing the Caribbean Development Bank, the following persons have been selected as directors. I will list the names, followed by the governors who would have made the respective nomination, and therefore by extension the constituency represented by the director named. Dr. Carol Nelson, Jamaica. Mr. Clint Ramcharan, Trinidad and Tobago and Haiti. Mr. John Roll, the Bahamas. Mr. Nirmal Rekha, Guyana. Mrs. Juanita Thorington Powlett, Barbados. Ms. Tracy Polius, St. Lucia and the Commonwealth of Dominica. Mr. Timothy Antoine, Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Mr. Whitfield Harris, Jr., Antigua and Barbuda and St. Kitts and Nevis. Ms. Yvonne Hyde, Belize and Anguilla, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, Montserrat and the Turks and Caicos Islands. Mrs. Liane Pinas Halfide, Suriname. Mr. Alberto de Brigard, Colombia. Ambassador Raul Licauzi, Venezuela. Mrs. Maria Isabel Lozano Santin, Mexico. Ms. Louise Clement, Canada. Mr. Hugh Walker, United Kingdom. Mrs. Stefania Bazzoni, Italy. Dr. Martin Kipping, Germany. And Mr. He Jiang, the People's Republic of China. That concludes the Chairman's report on nomination of new directors. It gives me great pleasure, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, to thank you very much for your attendance and patience during the course of this opening ceremony. And before I formally bring the ceremony to a close, simply to announce that governors and directors are kindly asked to remain in this dome for the official group photographs. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I now bring to a close this opening ceremony of the 44th meeting of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank. Thank you very much.